you can barely understand him. Shane Mosley. Let's go ahead and speak on Shane Mosley. Shane Mosley coming out and saying, and he gave his honest opinion, but he said that Oscar De La Hoya would have beaten all of those guys. He said Oscar De La Hoya would have beaten Floyd in his prime, in Oscar's prime and Shane's prime. He said Oscar would have beat Floyd and everything. You got to understand, these are the facts. And again, who am I to question a legend like Shane Mosley? Shane Mosley could come back, but again, even though he's never been knocked out, he's already starting to have slurred speech. Once you start to hear that, he needs to, please don't come back. Please don't, because you're going to end up like Zab Judah. Zab Judah tried to come back and stay in the thing, and he almost died. So I don't want to see these legends die. You know what I mean? We don't want to see that. So back to Shane Mosley. Shane said that all those guys in a TMZ interview, all those guys in their prime, Oscar would have beat them. But that's not in context. In context is when you fought Oscar De La Hoya at 147, Floyd Mayweather was nowhere near your guys' weight class. Nowhere near your guys' weight class. Out of all of you fighters, Zab Judah, Shane Mosley, Vernon Forrest, Oscar De La Hoya, Fernando Vargas, the list goes on and on. I can continue. Paul Williams, all these guys, like the list goes on and on and on. Out of all those guys from that era, Floyd was at 135, maybe 140. Winky Wright, again, all of these guys, these legends, Floyd was nowhere near that weight class. When you guys were fighting at the welterweight limit, you, Zab, all you guys are fighting at the welterweight limit. No, none of you. None of you guys were around. What's weird, too, is the last undisputed welterweight champion was Zab Judah, who almost had a fight with Shane Mosley post their prime, but they talk about all these fights. None of them fought Shane. None of them fought Zab Judah. Oscar never fought Zab. Shane Mosley never fought Zab. They were all fighting at 154 when Zab and Corey Spinks were ruling the welterweight division. Ricky Hatton was ruling 140, and Zab Judah was ruling the welterweight division. They never fought him. Oscar De La Hoya, and I think the reason why Shane Mosley is saying that is because Oscar De La Hoya beat Pernell Whitaker. I'm going to say this right now. You know what? I'm not going to say it, because that's a man who can't speak for himself, and that's another fighter, that's another legend. So I'm not even going to get into that fight. I can see why he thinks a prime Oscar De La Hoya beats a prime Floyd Mayweather, because of, Oscar De La Hoya beat Pernell Whitaker, who was like a phenom back then. You know what I mean? So I can see that. I can see his logic in seeing that. Like, well, wow, you beat a prime Pernell Whitaker. He could definitely beat a prime Floyd. They're two different fighters. They're extremely two different fighters. And they're two different sizes. These guys, Pernell Whitaker, another one. Chavez, another one. These guys are all bigger than Floyd. Floyd didn't start fighting welterweight till the end of his career. Till the end of his career is when he started fighting welterweight at 147 pounds. That was towards the end. His big major peak was the Gotti fight, and then came down, then went up, Henry Brucelis. You know what I mean? And then finally with the Chop Chop, that was at 140. These guys are already fighting at 154 and 160. These guys are fighting way bigger than him. So when they're older than he is. So you can't really, there's context to everything. Oh yeah, Oscar De La, Shane Mosley said that Oscar would have beat them in the pro. Yeah, you know what? He was 2 weight divisions over him. Yeah. If Floyd had to move up 2 weight divisions at that time and fight Oscar De La Hoya, which he ended up doing in the future, he ended up only having a couple of fights at 147, Zab Judah and Carlos Baldomir. And then where did he go? 154 to fight Oscar De La Hoya. So it would have been the same thing in the prime. It'd have been a lot closer fight because that fight at 154 was a lot closer. But they're not in the same, you can't really compare. You can never really compare those two guys because they were never really in the same. Oscar De La Hoya fought all the way as high and successfully as high as middleweight. I mean, he got stopped by Bernard Hopkins, but Bernard Hopkins was a monster. So you can't compare these guys to these fighters that were always that far ahead in size. Floyd barely fought at 154 pounds. 2 fights, technically 3. Oscar, Canelo, McGregor. That's it. And technically the 3 biggest fights of his career. 3 money-making fights of his career. Oscar, the fight that catapulted him into the star that he is today. Canelo, another huge major fight that put Canelo on, and Canelo's never lost, and he's not been the same fighter since he lost to Floyd Mayweather. 2, and then Conor McGregor, the biggest, cross fight to this date. All around the 154. Canelo was a catchweight at 152. Still, can't really compare them. These other guys are fighting, like I said, as high as middleweight. So, but I respect Shane Mosley's opinion. I can see where he's coming from because we saw what Pernell Whitaker did to Roger Mayweather. So I can definitely see that logic. It makes sense. It's something that I respect. It's an opinion that I respect. A lot of people jump on Shane, and again, I'm not jumping on Shane. I'm just giving the other perspective, devil's advocate. Like if Shane was in front of me, I would say, Shane, you and I both know that Floyd is smaller than all of you. Like we all know that. We all know that. You guys have been so big for so long. You know what I mean? Even Zab, all you guys are in the bigger weight class. You guys were all there first. The only person behind Floyd as far as size was Pacquiao. That's it. Everybody else started, even because Shane started at 135, but he had to quickly move up. Same thing with Oscar. All these guys started light, but they had to quickly move up. They had to get out of those 30. If you had a 3 in your weight, they had to get out of that. They had to hurry up and get the welterweight in these higher weights because they're just naturally bigger men.